Miami, Florida, June 15, 2003, a seemingly ordinary Sunday evening that would mark the beginning of one of South Florida's most perplexing missing persons cases. Brooke Callahan was just 19 years old, a bright psychology student at the University of Miami, known for her academic dedication and warm personality. Originally from Phoenix, Arizona, she had moved to Miami just a year prior, eager to pursue her education at one of the country's most prestigious psychology programs. That evening, Brooke was working her usual shift at Coastal Brew, a popular cafe in the heart of South Beach. Security footage from the cafe showed her smiling as she served customers, occasionally brushing her auburn hair from her face as she moved efficiently behind the counter. According to her co-workers, nothing seemed unusual about her behavior that day. Brooke was Brooke, her manager would later tell investigators, focused, friendly, planning her study schedule for finals week between taking orders. At 9:37 p.m., cameras captured Brooke clocking out, exchanging brief goodbyes with her colleagues, and walking into the warm Miami night. She was wearing blue jeans, a white blouse, and carrying a small backpack with her university books. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Brooke Callahan by anyone who knew her. It wasn't until 2 days later that alarm bells began to ring. Vanessa Morales, Brooke's roommate and fellow student, had been visiting family in Tampa over the weekend. When she returned to their shared apartment near campus on Tuesday morning, there was no sign of Brooke. Her bed was untouched. Her morning medications for mild asthma sat unopened on her nightstand. "I called her phone maybe 15 times, Vanessa later recounted to police. "Brooke never missed classes. She never stayed out without telling me. Something was wrong. I could feel it." By Tuesday afternoon, after confirming Brooke hadn't attended any of her classes or shown up for her scheduled shift at the cafe, Vanessa filed a missing person report with the Miami-Dade Police Department. Initially, the case received routine handling. Young adults frequently went off the grid temporarily, especially in a city like Miami with its vibrant nightlife and beach culture. Detective Landon Rivera was assigned to the case. A 12-year veteran of the department with a reputation for thoroughness, Rivera had handled dozens of missing persons cases throughout his career. But something about Brooke's disappearance immediately struck him as unusual. "College students don't just vanish," he noted in his initial case file. "Especially not ones with Brooke's profile. Academically focused, routine-oriented, no history of substance abuse or risky behavior." The investigation accelerated when Brooke's car, a silver 2001 Honda Civic, was discovered in a parking lot 3 blocks from the cafe. Her purse was still inside, containing her wallet with $43 in cash, her driver's license and credit cards. Her phone was wedged between the passenger seat and center console. The keys were nowhere to be found. Forensic teams combed the vehicle, finding nothing immediately suspicious, no signs of struggle, no blood or unusual prints. The car appeared to have been simply abandoned. This puzzling detail would become the first of many in the increasingly complex case. When investigators pulled surveillance footage from businesses surrounding the parking lot, they made a disturbing discovery. Cameras from a nearby bank captured Brooke walking toward her car at 9:52 p.m. that Sunday night, just 15 minutes after leaving work, but she never appeared to enter the vehicle. The angle of the camera didn't provide a complete view of what happened next, creating a crucial blind spot in the timeline. Detective Rivera expanded the search, requesting footage from every business within a 6-block radius. Most cameras showed nothing, but a convenience store 2 blocks away captured a partial image of what might have been Brooke walking past at 10:08 p.m., this time heading away from the parking lot. The footage was grainy, and the figure's face wasn't visible, leaving investigators uncertain if it was actually her. "The timing works," Rivera noted, "but why would she leave her car, purse, and phone behind? That's what doesn't add up." As the first 72 hours passed, the critical window in missing persons cases, Rivera intensified his efforts, interviewing everyone in Brooke's circle. Her professors described her as exceptionally promising and dedicated. Classmates called her friendly but private. No one reported any concerning behavior or threats. When interviewed, Brooke's parents, who immediately flew in from Phoenix, painted a picture of a responsible, level-headed young woman who had never before gone off the radar. They provided medical records, dental information, and dozens of recent photographs to aid in the search. Brooke had her whole life mapped out, her mother told detectives through tears. "This isn't like her. Something happened to my daughter." The investigation took its first significant turn when Vanessa Morales revealed that Brooke had recently ended a relationship with a man named Tyler Blackwood, whom she had been dating for approximately 7 months. She broke it off about 3 weeks before she disappeared, Vanessa explained. Tyler didn't take it well. He kept calling, showing up places where he knew she'd be. It wasn't violent or anything, just persistent. Brooke was starting to get creeped out. Tyler Blackwood, 24, worked as a fitness instructor at an upscale gym in Coral Gables. Initial background checks showed no criminal record, though he had one dismissed complaint of harassment from a former girlfriend 2 years prior. This information moved him to the top of Detective Rivera's persons of interest list. As the first week of the investigation closed, police had distributed Brooke's photo to every law enforcement agency in Florida. Her face appeared on local news broadcasts, social media pages, and flyers posted throughout Miami. The FBI was brought in to consult, bringing additional resources and expertise to the case. Yet despite the expanding investigation, the trail was growing colder. No activity was detected on Brooke's credit cards or bank accounts. Her social media accounts remained dormant. Cell phone records showed her last outgoing message was to Vanessa at 8:13 p.m. on the night she disappeared. Closing up shop soon, pizza night still on for tomorrow? The lack of concrete evidence frustrated investigators, but Detective Rivera remained stubbornly committed. During a department briefing 8 days after Brooke's disappearance, he made a declaration that would prove prophetic. "We're missing something obvious. People don't just evaporate. Brooke Callahan is somewhere and someone knows exactly where. This isn't over, not by a long shot." As June turned to July, the investigation would take an unexpected turn when detectives finally got the opportunity to formally interview Tyler Blackwood. His statement seemed cooperative and transparent, but Detective Rivera noticed subtle inconsistencies that raised questions. Tyler claimed to have been at his apartment alone on the night of Brooke's disappearance, with no witnesses to verify his whereabouts. "I haven't seen Brooke in weeks," he told investigators with apparent concern. "We broke up, yeah, but I respected her decision. I've been worried sick since I heard she was missing." What Tyler didn't know was that investigators had already begun piecing together his movements through cell tower data and security cameras. The digital breadcrumbs would tell a different story than the one he was presenting, discrepancies that would lead investigators down a dark and shocking path that nobody could have anticipated. As summer deepened in Miami, Brooke Callahan remained missing, her fate unknown. But the first pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and Detective Landon Rivera was more determined than ever to uncover the truth, no matter how disturbing it might prove to be. As July 2003 began, the search for Brooke Callahan intensified. Detective Landon Rivera established a dedicated task force within the department, converting a small conference room into what the team called Brooke's Room, walls covered with timelines, photographs, and maps, detailing every known moment of her final day. The initial interview with Tyler Blackwood had raised subtle red flags for Rivera. Though Tyler appeared cooperative, there was something performative about his concern. When asked about his relationship with Brooke, Tyler described it as intense but healthy, a characterization that would soon be contradicted by numerous witnesses. "We need to dig deeper into Blackwood," Rivera instructed his team. "Something doesn't add up." The detective began methodically constructing a profile of Brooke's ex-boyfriend. Tyler Blackwood had moved to Miami from Seattle 4 years earlier. His employment record showed he had worked at 3 different fitness centers in that time, never staying longer than 18 months. Colleagues described him as charismatic but intense, a fitness instructor who developed unusually close relationships with some clients, particularly younger women. When investigators spoke with Tyler's former employers, a pattern emerged. At each job, there had been informal complaints about his behavior. Nothing that reached the level of official documentation, but enough to create a troubling picture. "He could be very possessive of his clients," one gym manager confided. "We had to speak with him twice about respecting boundaries. Eventually, we just didn't renew his contract." Meanwhile, forensic analysis of Brooke's phone revealed deleted text messages that had been recovered from the device's memory. The exchanges between her and Tyler in the weeks before her disappearance painted a concerning picture of their relationship. "Please stop calling my professors to check if I'm in class," one message from Brooke read. Another, "I meant what I said, Tyler. We're done. I need you to respect that." His responses oscillated between apologies and accusations. "I only worry because I care. Who have you been talking to about us? No one will ever understand you like I do." When investigators interviewed Brooke's classmates and friends more extensively, a clearer picture of her relationship with Tyler emerged. Emma Townsend, a close friend from her psychology program, revealed that Brooke had been increasingly anxious about Tyler's behavior in the weeks before she disappeared. He would show up at places where he knew she'd be, Emma explained. The library, the campus cafe outside her lectures, always with some excuse about why he was there. Brooke started varying her routes around campus, taking different paths to class. She was genuinely starting to get scared. Another friend, Marcus Chen, described an incident at a study group just 10 days before Brooke's disappearance. Tyler showed up unannounced, claiming he needed to give Brooke something important. When she stepped outside with him, we could hear him getting agitated. When she came back, she was visibly shaken. She wouldn't tell us what he'd said, but she asked if one of us could walk her back to her apartment. Armed with this new information, Detective Rivera obtained a warrant to search Tyler's apartment and electronic devices. The search revealed a disturbing level of obsession. Tyler had created a detailed spreadsheet tracking Brooke's schedule, her classes, work shifts, study groups, and even when she typically did laundry at her apartment complex. Investigators also found a hidden folder containing hundreds of photos of Brooke, many taken from a distance without her knowledge. Most concerning was a journal in which Tyler had written extensively about his relationship with Brooke, depicting it as a destined connection that others were trying to sabotage. The final entry, dated just 3 days before her disappearance, read, "She'll understand eventually. Some people need to be saved from themselves." Despite this troubling evidence, Tyler maintained his innocence when brought in for a second interview. He acknowledged tracking Brooke's movements, but claimed it was out of concern, not malice. "I knew something bad was going to happen to her," he insisted. "I was trying to protect her." When confronted with the journal entry, Tyler claimed it was being taken out of context. "I meant saved from bad decisions, from wasting her potential," he explained, his composure noticeably slipping. "I would never hurt Brooke, never." The evidence, while deeply concerning, remained circumstantial. There was nothing directly connecting Tyler to Brooke's disappearance. No witnesses placed them together that night. The recovered security footage didn't show Tyler anywhere in the vicinity of the cafe or the parking lot where Brooke's car was found. "We need more," Rivera told his team. "Keep digging into his background, his movements that night. There has to be something we're missing." A breakthrough came when investigators analyzed Tyler's cell phone records more thoroughly. While his phone had pinged towers near his apartment the night Brooke disappeared, supporting his alibi, there was a curious gap in activity. Between 9:15 p.m. and 11:47 p.m., his phone had neither made nor received any calls or texts, and appeared to be powered off or in an area without service. 2.5 hours, Rivera noted, more than enough time to intercept Brooke after work, drive somewhere, and return home. When questioned about this gap, Tyler claimed he had been at home taking a shower and then watching a movie with his phone on silent. With no witnesses to verify this account and no surveillance cameras in his apartment building, the alibi was weak but not disprovable. Further investigation into Tyler's background revealed another concerning detail. He had inherited a property in Homestead, a rural area south of Miami, from his grandfather who had passed away the previous year. When questioned about this property, Tyler claimed it was abandoned and in disrepair, that he had visited it only once after inheriting it and had plans to sell it eventually. Property records confirmed his ownership, but when investigators drove by the location, they noted recent tire tracks in the overgrown driveway, suggesting someone had visited more recently than Tyler admitted. However, without evidence of a crime, they had no grounds for a search warrant of the premises. By August, despite the mounting suspicion surrounding Tyler Blackwood, the case had reached a frustrating impasse. The evidence suggested obsession, but not necessarily abduction or harm. Tyler was placed under surveillance, but he maintained a normal routine, working at the gym, grocery shopping, occasionally meeting friends for drinks. "He's either innocent or very, very careful," noted one of the surveillance officers. Meanwhile, the Callahan family was growing increasingly desperate. They increased the reward for information to $25,000 and appeared regularly on local and then national news programs. Brooke's father, a retired firefighter, temporarily relocated to Miami to assist with the ongoing search efforts, organizing volunteer groups to canvass areas that hadn't been thoroughly searched by police. "Someone knows something," he repeated at every opportunity. "Please, if you know anything about what happened to my daughter, come forward." As summer turned to fall, the case took an unexpected turn when a woman named Serena Diaz contacted the police tip line. Serena, a bartender at a club in downtown Miami, claimed to have seen Brooke on the night of June 28th, nearly 2 weeks after her disappearance. She was with a group of men looking disoriented, Serena reported. I recognized her from the news. When I approached her, one of the men said she was fine, just had too much to drink, and they quickly left. This potential sighting shifted resources toward investigating possible human trafficking connections. Miami's position as a gateway city made it a hub for such criminal operations. The FBI became more actively involved, bringing in agents specializing in trafficking cases. Detective Rivera, while not dismissing the trafficking angle, remained skeptical. The timing of Serena's sighting coincided with the first major news coverage of Brooke's disappearance. Additionally, the description she provided, particularly of Brooke's clothing, differed significantly from what she had been wearing when last seen. Nevertheless, the lead had to be pursued. As investigators delved into this new possibility, they continued monitoring Tyler Blackwood. His behavior had become increasingly erratic. He stopped showing up reliably for work and was eventually fired from the gym. Neighbors reported hearing him arguing loudly, seemingly with himself, in his apartment late at night. In October, nearly 4 months after Brooke's disappearance, Tyler abruptly sold his apartment and moved out of the city, telling acquaintances he was returning to Seattle. Surveillance confirmed he had indeed flown to Washington, but he returned to Miami just 3 days later, checking into a motel in North Miami Beach under a different name. This suspicious behavior intensified police interest, but still did not provide grounds for arrest. When questioned about this bizarre behavior, Tyler claimed the media attention around Brooke's case and his connection to it had made it impossible for him to live normally in Miami. "Everyone looks at me like I did something terrible," he told detectives. "I loved Brooke. I'm grieving too." By the end of 2003, the investigation had expanded to include dozens of potential leads, none of which had panned out. The trafficking angle had been exhaustively investigated, with FBI agents infiltrating known networks and finding no trace of Brooke. Additional reported sightings in Tampa, Orlando, and even Atlanta had all proven false or inconclusive. Throughout this time, Detective Rivera continued returning to Tyler Blackwood as the most likely key to the mystery. He maintained close surveillance of Tyler's movements, noting that despite claiming to be planning a permanent move back to Seattle, Tyler made regular drives south toward Homestead, usually late at night. "Who is visiting that property?" Rivera insisted to his superiors. "There's something there, I'm certain of it." But without probable cause for a warrant, the Homestead house remained inaccessible to investigators. The case was gradually shifting from active to cold. Resources were being redirected to more recent disappearances and homicides. By February 2004, only Detective Rivera and one other officer remained assigned to Brooke's case full-time. "We're not giving up," Rivera assured the Callahan family during their monthly update call. "But I need to be honest, we need a breakthrough." That breakthrough would come from an unexpected source and would eventually reveal a truth more disturbing than anyone had imagined. But for now, as winter settled over Miami, Brooke Callahan remained one of hundreds of missing young women across America. Her fate unknown, her case growing colder with each passing day. What no one yet realized was that the seemingly abandoned property in Homestead held secrets that would shock even the most seasoned investigators, secrets that would eventually bring both closure and horror to all involved in the search for Brooke Callahan. By spring 2004, the once bustling investigation into Brooke Callahan's disappearance had dwindled to a trickle of sporadic leads and diminishing resources. The case file, once prominently displayed on Detective Rivera's desk, now resided in a cabinet alongside other unsolved cases, accessible but no longer the center of daily attention. For the Callahan family, this slow transition was agonizing. "It feels like the world is forgetting her," Brooke's mother told reporters during a press conference marking the 1-year anniversary of the disappearance. "But we will never stop looking." The investigation had not officially gone cold. Detective Rivera made sure of that, spending countless off-duty hours reviewing evidence and following up on tips that continued to come in, albeit with decreasing frequency. His superiors had grudgingly allowed him to remain connected to the case, though they had reassigned him to other, more recent investigations. "Landon, you need to accept that we may never know what happened to Brooke," his captain had told him during a performance review. "It's admirable, your dedication, but there are other victims who need your skills." Rivera had nodded, agreed verbally, and then continued pursuing Brooks' case in whatever time he could find. Something about this particular disappearance had embedded itself in his professional conscience. Perhaps it was the haunted look in her parents' eyes, or the nagging sense that the answer was just beyond his reach. Whatever the reason, he wouldn't let it go. July 2004 brought what initially seemed like a significant breakthrough. A convenience store clerk in Tampa, nearly 300 miles north of Miami, reported seeing a young woman resembling Brooke purchasing toiletries and prepared food. The clerk, who had recently seen a rebroadcast of Brooke's story on a true crime television program, was confident enough in the identification to contact authorities. She had the same face shape, same color hair, though it was shorter, the clerk insisted. She seemed nervous, kept looking over her shoulder. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and hurried out. Surveillance footage from the store was grainy, but showed a woman of similar build and coloring to Brooke. The Tampa Police Department mobilized significant resources, canvassing the area around the store and reviewing additional surveillance footage from nearby businesses. Detective Rivera drove to Tampa personally, spending a week assisting with the investigation. The potential sighting generated renewed media attention, bringing Brooks' case back into the public eye. The Callahan family, desperately holding on to hope, relocated temporarily to Tampa to assist with the search. Volunteers distributed flyers throughout the city. Billboards with Brooks' image and the updated reward amount, now $50,000, appeared along major highways. But as August progressed, the Tampa lead gradually unraveled. Enhanced analysis of the convenience store footage by FBI specialists determined that while there was a resemblance to Brooke, the woman in question was likely not her. The decisive factor came when investigators identified and located the woman from the video. A 23-year-old graduate student named Melissa Hargrove, who bore a striking resemblance to Brooke, but was demonstrably not her. "I'm so sorry," Melissa told the Callahan family when she met with them to clear up the confusion. "I can't imagine what you're going through." The collapse of the Tampa lead dealt a devastating blow to both the investigation and the Callahan family's morale. They returned to Phoenix more withdrawn than before, though they maintained regular contact with Detective Rivera. Meanwhile, Tyler Blackwood had established a pattern of behavior that investigators found suspicious, but not conclusive. He had found employment at a marina in Key Biscayne, working irregular hours maintaining boats. He had relocated to a small apartment in South Miami, living frugally and keeping to himself. Most notably, he continued his nocturnal visits to the homestead property, typically once every 2 weeks, always after midnight. Rivera had managed to justify minimal surveillance of these visits, but observers reported nothing obviously suspicious. Tyler would arrive, spend approximately an hour inside the seemingly abandoned house, and then leave. Without probable cause for a search warrant, the property remained a tantalizing but inaccessible piece of the puzzle. In October 2004, the investigation briefly veered in a new and alarming direction when an informant with connections to organized crime approached the FBI with information suggesting Brooke may have been targeted by a human trafficking ring operating between Florida and South America. They specifically look for young, attractive college students, the informant claimed. American girls fetch premium prices in certain markets. Sometimes they're kept in holding locations for months before being transported out of the country. This information aligned with certain aspects of Brooke's case, particularly her abrupt disappearance without signs of violence and the lack of activity on her financial accounts or social media. The FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force devoted significant resources to investigating this angle, deploying undercover agents to infiltrate suspected trafficking networks in Miami, Bogota, and São Paulo. For 3 months, this international investigation proceeded with cautious hope that it might finally provide answers. Detective Rivera was skeptical. The trafficking theory didn't explain Tyler's suspicious behavior or obsession with Brooke, but he acknowledged it was a possibility that needed to be thoroughly explored. By January 2005, the trafficking angle had been exhaustively investigated and ultimately dismissed. No evidence connecting Brooke to any known trafficking networks was discovered. The original informant's credibility came into question when other information he had provided proved inaccurate. Back to square one, Rivera noted grimly in his case journal, but at least we've eliminated another possibility. The investigation's momentum continued to wane as 2005 progressed. Brooke's case was officially reclassified as inactive in March, not closed, but no longer receiving dedicated resources. Rivera negotiated an arrangement with his superiors that allowed him to continue investigating in his spare time, a concession granted out of respect for his dedication rather than any departmental optimism about solving the case. Throughout this period, Rivera maintained periodic contact with Tyler Blackwood, conducting informal interviews that revealed little new information but kept pressure on the suspect. Tyler's demeanor during these encounters was increasingly hostile. "You're ruining my life over a theory," he told Rivera during one particularly tense conversation in April 2005. "I've cooperated with every request. I've answered every question. What more do you want from me?" "The truth would be a good start," Rivera had responded, watching carefully as Tyler's composure momentarily slipped. "You wouldn't recognize the truth if it was staring you in the face," Tyler had muttered before walking away. These cryptic interactions only strengthened Rivera's conviction that Tyler was involved in Brooke's disappearance. But conviction wasn't evidence, and evidence remained frustratingly elusive. Summer 2005 marked the 2-year anniversary of Brooke's disappearance. The media coverage was noticeably reduced. A brief mention on local news, a small article in the Miami Herald. The Callahan family held a private memorial service in Phoenix, not a funeral, but an acknowledgement of the growing likelihood that Brooke would not be found alive. "We still hope for answers," her father told the few reporters who attended. "We still hope for justice, but we also need to find a way to live with this uncertainty." For Detective Rivera, the anniversary prompted a complete review of the case file. He spent a week's vacation time sequestered in his home office, reading every report, statement, and analysis from the beginning, looking for something, anything that might have been overlooked. This methodical review yielded a curious observation. In the months following Brooke's disappearance, Tyler had made several large cash withdrawals from his bank account, totaling nearly $12,000. These transactions had been noted in the initial financial investigation, but not thoroughly explored, as they began several weeks after Brooke vanished and thus weren't considered immediately relevant. Rivera began tracing where this money had gone. It hadn't been used for travel. Tyler's movements during that period were well documented. It hadn't been deposited in any other known accounts. The money had simply disappeared. When questioned about these withdrawals, Tyler claimed they were for personal investments, but refused to elaborate. Without evidence of a crime, financial investigators couldn't compel more detailed information. This financial anomaly added another piece to the puzzle, but still not enough to move the case forward substantially. As 2005 drew to a close, even Rivera began to accept that Brooke's case might never be solved. "Sometimes the job breaks your heart," he confided to his wife one evening. "Sometimes you just have to live with not knowing." The winter of 2006 passed quietly, with only occasional developments in the case. The Callahan family continued to maintain a website dedicated to finding Brooke, though updates became less frequent. They established a scholarship in Brooke's name at her former high school in Phoenix, a tacit acknowledgement of their dwindling hope. Tyler Blackwood continued his peculiar pattern of nocturnal visits to the homestead property, though now sometimes going months between visits. He had been promoted at the marina, taking on administrative responsibilities that gave him a veneer of stability and respectability. By 2007, Brooke's case had receded from public consciousness almost entirely, remembered primarily by those directly involved and true crime enthusiasts who occasionally discussed it on emerging internet forums. Detective Rivera, though still officially connected to the case, had been forced by professional reality to focus primarily on other investigations. And then, in January 2008, everything changed. The call came to Rivera's desk on a Tuesday morning, a woman's voice deliberately disguised offering information about Brooke Callahan. "You've been looking in the wrong direction," the caller said. "Check the building permits, check what he purchased, check the property and homestead more carefully." Before Rivera could ask for clarification or the caller's identity, the line went dead. The call was too short to trace, and the number was registered to a disposable phone purchased with cash at a convenience store. This cryptic tip, coming after years of dead ends, would finally provide the breakthrough that Rivera had been searching for. It would lead investigators down a disturbing path, revealing a truth far more horrifying than anyone had imagined. The mystery of Brooke Callahan's disappearance was about to be solved, but the answers would provide little comfort to those who had spent years searching for her. As Rivera began pursuing this new lead, he had no way of knowing that he was just weeks away from uncovering one of the most shocking cases in Florida's criminal history, a case that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Detective Landon Rivera stared at the telephone on his desk, the anonymous caller's words echoing in his mind. Check the building permits. Check what he purchased. Check the property and homestead more carefully. After nearly 5 years of dead ends, this cryptic message felt like the first genuine lead in months. Despite the case's inactive status, Rivera immediately requested resources to investigate this new information. His supervisor, Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez, had been supportive of his ongoing commitment to Brooks' case, recognizing Rivera's instinct and dedication as valuable departmental assets. "I'll give you 2 weeks," she told him after reviewing his request. "If you find something concrete, we'll discuss reopening the case officially." Rivera began with the building permits. Working with county records offices, he discovered that in April 2003, 2 months before Brooks' disappearance, Tyler Blackwood had filed for renovation permits for the homestead property he'd inherited from his grandfather. The permits were for structural repairs and bathroom renovation, fairly standard improvements for an older home. What caught Rivera's attention was the timing. Tyler had begun renovations just weeks after meeting Brooke, according to witness statements from their early relationship. More significantly, he had allowed the permits to expire in October 2003, with county inspectors noting that the work appeared to have been abandoned before completion. He started renovations and then stopped, Rivera noted in his case journal. Why? What changed? The detective's next step was to investigate what Tyler had purchased around the time of Brooks' disappearance. This proved more challenging, as Tyler had made most purchases in cash. However, by subpoenaing his bank records from 2003 through 2005, Rivera identified large withdrawals that could be traced to specific dates. Armed with these dates, Rivera methodically visited hardware stores, building supply companies and home improvement centers in the area surrounding Tyler's former apartment and the homestead property. At a Home Depot in South Miami, he struck gold. The store's records showed that a customer matching Tyler's description had made large purchases in May and June 2003, paying primarily in cash but using a store credit card for a portion of the transactions. These purchases included unusual quantities of soundproofing materials, specialized door hinges, reinforced metal brackets, and electrical supplies suitable for security systems. He bought enough soundproofing to cover a small recording studio, noted the store manager, who helped Rivera access the records. Not typical for a standard home renovation. Even more concerning were purchases made at a medical supply company in Coral Gables. Using a combination of surveillance footage and sales records, Rivera confirmed that Tyler had purchased an unusual assortment of items: intravenous fluid bags, catheters, bandages, disinfectants, and basic monitoring equipment like a blood pressure cuff and thermometer. When questioned, a sales associate remembered Tyler claiming he was preparing medical kits for a sailing expedition business. The associate had found the explanation plausible, given Tyler's employment at a marina and the popularity of ocean excursions among tourists. "It was a bit unusual but not unheard of," she told Rivera. "Many boats keep extensive medical supplies on board for emergencies at sea." Rivera's investigation took a darker turn when he discovered that Tyler had also made several purchases from security equipment suppliers. These included motion sensors, small surveillance cameras, and an electronic door locking system that could be controlled remotely. He was building something, Rivera concluded during a briefing with Lieutenant Gonzalez. Not renovating the house, building something inside it, something secure, something hidden. With this new evidence, Rivera finally secured a warrant to investigate Tyler's financial records more thoroughly. This revealed a pattern of regular purchases at grocery stores and pharmacies that seemed excessive for a single person. The purchases included long-shelf life foods, vitamins, and basic medications like pain relievers and antihistamines. He was stockpiling, Rivera noted, preparing for something long-term. Most significantly, Rivera discovered that Tyler had taken a week of vacation from his gym instructor job in early June 2003, the week before Brooke disappeared. During this time, his cell phone had pinged exclusively from towers near the homestead property. He was there working on something right before she vanished, Rivera told his team. This can't be coincidence. Despite these suspicious findings, Rivera still lacked the probable cause necessary for a search warrant of the homestead property. The evidence was circumstantial, concerning, suggestive of preparation for some kind of confinement, but not definitively connected to Brooke's disappearance. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the officers assisting Rivera had been tasked with reviewing satellite imagery of the homestead property, looking for any visible changes to the structure over time. What he found was subtle but significant. "Look at the roof line in these images," the officer pointed out. "In March 2003, it's uniform. By July, there's this small protrusion here, could be a vent of some kind. And by October, you can see what looks like a tiny satellite dish or antenna that wasn't there before." Rivera immediately recognized the implications. He modified the house to add ventilation and communication capability, but not in any visible way from the street level. He was creating a space that needed air exchange and possibly internet or cable access. This evidence, combined with the purchases and Tyler's documented presence at the property, finally persuaded a judge to issue a search warrant for the homestead location. Rivera insisted on comprehensive planning before executing the warrant, bringing in structural engineers to review the property's blueprints and SWAT team members to ensure all approaches were covered. "If she's there," he told his team during preparation, "if she's been there all this time, we need to proceed with extreme caution, both for her safety and for evidentiary purposes." On March 15, 2008, nearly 5 years after Brooke Callahan's disappearance, a convoy of unmarked police vehicles approached the homestead property before dawn. Surveillance had confirmed that Tyler was at his apartment in South Miami under discreet observation by plainclothes officers. The property itself appeared abandoned, overgrown landscaping, peeling paint, and windows covered with sun-faded newspapers from inside, a perfect camouflage for something more sinister. SWAT officers secured the perimeter while engineers used thermal imaging equipment to scan the structure, looking for any signs of human presence. The results were inconclusive. The thick concrete walls of the old house blocked most thermal signatures. The entry team moved in at 6:18 a.m., breaching the front door with minimal force. The interior of the main house appeared to match its exterior, neglected, dusty, with minimal furniture covered in plastic sheets. A preliminary search revealed nothing immediately suspicious. The house consisted of a living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom, all appearing untouched for months, if not years. "Check every wall, every floor, every ceiling," Rivera instructed. "Look for anything that doesn't match the original blueprints." For 2 hours, officers meticulously examined the structure, measuring dimensions, tapping walls for hollow spots, and comparing the actual layout to county records. It was in the garage, a detached structure behind the main house, that they found the first real clue. The garage was approximately 24 by 30 feet, according to property records, but measurements of the interior space showed it was actually several feet smaller in both dimensions. Additionally, one section of the concrete floor sounded different when struck with a hammer, hollower, suggesting a space underneath. "There's something here," announced the structural engineer who had been consulting on the search. "This wall, it's not original to the structure. It's newer, and it's been built to look old." Using specialized equipment, the team confirmed the presence of a void behind one of the garage walls. With painstaking care, they began to remove sections of the false wall, revealing a startling discovery, a small room containing a staircase leading down into darkness. Rivera, who had insisted on being present for the search, felt his heart racing as officers prepared to descend the stairs. "Proceed with extreme caution," he instructed. "If someone is down there, they've been in captivity for nearly 5 years. Their psychological state will be fragile." The staircase led to a reinforced door with an electronic locking mechanism, matching the type Tyler had purchased years earlier. The lock was powered and active, requiring a specialized team to bypass it without triggering any potential security measures. At 9:42 a.m., the door was successfully opened, revealing a shocking sight. A roughly 15 by 20-foot underground room, constructed like a bunker with concrete walls reinforced with steel. The space was divided into areas for sleeping, basic hygiene, and minimal exercise. A small ventilation system circulated air from above ground. Most disturbing were the cameras mounted in each corner of the room, all connected to a monitoring system that appeared to feed to a separate location. And there, sitting on a small bed pushed against the far wall, was Brooke Callahan. Her appearance was drastically changed from the vibrant college student who had disappeared nearly 5 years earlier. Significantly underweight, with long, unkempt hair and pallid skin that hadn't seen natural sunlight in years, she was almost unrecognizable. But her eyes, wide with fear and confusion at the sudden intrusion, were unmistakably hers. "Brooke," Rivera said softly, approaching slowly with his badge clearly visible. "I'm Detective Landon Rivera. We've been looking for you for a very long time." Her response was barely audible, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Are you real?" The medical team that had accompanied the search immediately began assessing Brooke's condition, while Rivera documented the scene. The room contained evidence of long-term captivity, a collection of books, a television that appeared to be connected to a DVD player, but not to any broadcast or cable service, and a calendar on which days had been meticulously marked off, though the date was wrong by several months. A rudimentary bathroom area included a shower connected to the house's plumbing system and basic toiletries. A small refrigerator contained carefully portioned meals, enough for approximately 2 weeks. Everything in the space spoke of methodical planning and control. "He comes every 2 weeks, Brooke told medics as they prepared to transport her to the hospital. "Sometimes less. I never know exactly when." Rivera, maintaining his professional composure despite the emotional weight of the discovery, ensured that every aspect of the bunker was thoroughly documented and preserved as evidence. Crime scene technicians would spend days cataloging the sophisticated imprisonment system Tyler had constructed, a project that, based on the evidence, had been meticulously planned months before Brooke's abduction. Meanwhile, officers at Tyler's apartment in South Miami moved in to make the arrest. When confronted with the news that Brooke had been found alive, Tyler did not express surprise or deny his involvement. Instead, according to the arresting officers, he simply nodded and said, "Is she okay?" This discovery sent shockwaves through Miami, and then the nation. The revelation that a missing person could be found alive after nearly 5 years in captivity was both horrifying and, for families of other missing persons, a source of painful hope. For Detective Rivera, the discovery brought complex emotions: vindication of his persistence, relief at finding Brooke alive, and horror at what she had endured. But most of all, it brought determination to ensure that Tyler Blackwood would face the fullest consequences for his actions. As Brooke was transported to a hospital specializing in trauma care, Rivera made a call he had imagined countless times over the years: to the Callahan family. "We found her," he told Brooke's father, his professional demeanor finally cracking. "She's alive." The investigation was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The shocking underground prison had raised as many questions as it answered. How had Tyler maintained this captivity for years without detection? What had Brooke endured? And perhaps most disturbing, what had been his ultimate plan? These questions would be answered in the coming weeks and months, revealing a case of obsession and calculated cruelty that would become one of Florida's most notorious crimes. But for now, as March 15, 2008, drew to a close, there was one undeniable truth: Brooke Callahan had survived, and her captor would finally face justice. As dawn broke over Miami on March 16, 2008, news of Brooke Callahan's rescue spread rapidly through media outlets nationwide. The story of a college student found alive after nearly 5 years in captivity captured public attention in a way few cases had before. Outside Jackson Memorial Hospital, where Brooke was receiving specialized care, reporters gathered in unprecedented numbers, hoping for updates on her condition and details about her ordeal. Inside, a team of medical professionals worked to address the physical consequences of Brooke's long confinement. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the trauma specialist overseeing her care, later described Brooke's condition to investigators. She exhibited severe muscle atrophy, vitamin D deficiency, and malnutrition, though not to the degree we might have expected. Whoever held her captive appeared to have provided calculated nutrition, enough to keep her alive and relatively functional, but not enough for optimal health. This clinical assessment aligned with evidence discovered in Tyler's apartment. Investigators found meticulously detailed spreadsheets tracking caloric intake, vitamin supplements, and exercise regimens, all designed to maintain Brooke in a weakened but stable condition. "He approached her captivity like an experiment," noted the forensic psychologist assigned to the case. "Everything was measured and controlled to maintain her in a state of dependency." Detective Rivera, who had been granted limited access to Brooke during her initial recovery, was struck by her psychological resilience. Despite years of isolation and trauma, she maintained remarkable lucidity and recall. "He wanted me to be grateful," she told Rivera during their first official interview, conducted with trauma counselors present. "That was important to him. that I recognize he was taking care of me, protecting me from a world he said was dangerous for me. Brooke described how Tyler had ambushed her that June night in 2003, approaching her in the parking lot with a story about car trouble. He seemed different, desperate, intense. When I tried to step back, he pressed something against my side. I thought it was a gun. It wasn't until later that I realized it was just his finger, but by then he'd already forced me into his car. The drive to Homestead had taken approximately an hour, during which Tyler had alternated between professions of love and ominous warnings about what might have happened had he not rescued her. Brooke, terrified but clear-headed, had memorized landmarks and turns, hoping for an opportunity to escape. But when we arrived, he blindfolded me. I felt him guiding me into a building, then downstairs. By the time he removed the blindfold, I was already in the room, the place where I'd spend the next 5 years. The underground bunker, as forensic teams continued to document, represented an extraordinary effort of planning and construction. Structural engineers determined that Tyler had excavated the space beneath the garage floor, reinforcing it with concrete and steel in a manner that required considerable knowledge and physical effort. This wasn't impulsive, Rivera explained to prosecutors building the case. The construction alone would have taken weeks, possibly months. He created this space specifically to hold her, long before he actually took her. The room's amenities told a disturbing story of long-term planning. The ventilation system included both mechanical air circulation and a rudimentary filtering system. The electrical wiring connected to the main house, but was on a separate circuit with backup battery power. Most disturbing was the sophisticated surveillance system that allowed Tyler to monitor Brooke from anywhere with internet access. He could watch me on his phone, Brooke explained. Sometimes he'd call me right after I did something, commenting on it. It was his way of reminding me that I was never really alone, even when he wasn't physically present. Forensic analysis of Tyler's electronic devices confirmed this account. His phone contained an application that connected to the cameras in Brooke's underground prison, allowing him to view her at any time. Records showed that he checked this feed multiple times daily, often for hours at a time. The psychological control extended beyond surveillance. Brooke described how Tyler would bring her books, movies, and occasionally news articles, all carefully selected, to reinforce his narrative that the outside world was dangerous and that he was her protector. He would bring articles about crimes against women, about accidents or disasters, she recalled. Anything to make me feel that the world outside was threatening. Over time, I began to realize he was creating a carefully curated reality. Perhaps most disturbing were the journals found in Tyler's apartment, detailed records of his interactions with Brooke, her responses to various stimuli, and his plans for their future together. These writings revealed a mind functioning under a twisted internal logic, where extreme control was rationalized as protection and love. "I'm saving her from a world that would destroy her purity," read one entry dated approximately 8 months after Brooke's abduction. "She's beginning to understand that this is for her own good. Soon she'll be ready for the next phase." What this next phase might have entailed remained unclear, as the later journal entries became increasingly incoherent, oscillating between grandiose plans for a life together and paranoid concerns that unspecified enemies were trying to find Brooke. As investigators pieced together the physical evidence, Brooke's testimony provided the human dimension of the case, the day-to-day reality of existing in prolonged captivity. She described the methodical routine Tyler had established: weekly supply deliveries, sporadic visits that could last hours or mere minutes, and long stretches of solitude, broken only by the books and DVDs he provided. "Time became abstract," she explained. "I tried to maintain a calendar, but without natural light or consistent information from the outside, I lost track. I later learned I was off by several months." The psychological tactics Tyler employed were sophisticated and calculated. Initially, he had been overtly controlling and sometimes threatening. Over time, he shifted to a strategy that alternated between kindness and withdrawal, creating a dynamic where Brooke found herself paradoxically grateful for his attention, even as she recognized the manipulation. "It's a common response in captivity situations," explained Dr. Sarah Mendelsohn, the forensic psychologist working with Brooke. "The captor becomes the sole source of human contact, of information, of everything the victim needs to survive. This creates a complex psychological dependency that shouldn't be mistaken for genuine emotional attachment." Brooke's remarkable resilience became evident as she described the mental strategies she had developed to survive. She had created elaborate memory exercises, recalling in vivid detail her life before captivity, her classes, friends, family vacations, even the layout of her childhood home. She composed stories and poems in her mind, some of which she had written down on the limited paper Tyler provided. "I refused to let him take my mind," she stated with quiet intensity. "My body was confined, but I worked every day to keep my thoughts free." This mental discipline proved crucial to both her survival and the subsequent investigation. Brooke was able to provide investigators with detailed timelines of Tyler's visits, patterns in his behavior, and specific statements he had made that would later prove damning in court. Meanwhile, the investigation into Tyler Blackwood was revealing a history that in retrospect contained clear warning signs. Former colleagues described his intense focus on controlling his environment and relationships. Previous girlfriends, contacted by investigators, reported behaviors ranging from excessive jealousy to subtle forms of isolation and control. "He would get upset if I didn't answer my phone immediately," one former girlfriend told investigators. "He wanted to know where I was at all times. When I finally ended things, he seemed calm, too calm. He just said I'd realize my mistake eventually." This pattern of escalating controlling behavior culminated in his relationship with Brooke, where fantasy finally translated into action. Psychological evaluations conducted after his arrest suggested a personality structure, combining narcissistic and obsessive features with an underlying paranoid worldview, a dangerous combination that had found its expression in Brooke's captivity. As the criminal case against Tyler took shape, another aspect of the investigation focused on how his actions had remained undetected for so long. The homestead property, while secluded, was not completely isolated. Neighbors, though distant, occasionally observed Tyler's visits, but had assumed he was simply maintaining the inherited property. He was always polite, kept to himself, one neighbor told investigators, said he was fixing the place up slowly to sell it. Nothing that would raise any red flags. This ability to maintain a veneer of normality while orchestrating an elaborate captivity pointed to a calculating intelligence that made Tyler's crimes all the more disturbing. He had maintained employment, social relationships, and even casual dating throughout the years of Brooke's imprisonment, compartmentalizing his life in a way that had prevented detection. By the end of March 2008, as Brooke began the long process of physical and psychological recovery, the full scope of what she had endured began to emerge. The underground room, approximately 300 square feet in total, had been her entire world for 1,736 days. During that time, she had been entirely dependent on Tyler for food, medical care, and human contact. The medical examination revealed that despite the calculated nutrition Tyler had provided, Brooke had lost nearly 30 pounds during her captivity. Her muscle mass was significantly reduced, and she suffered from chronic conditions related to limited movement and poor air quality. Most concerning to her treatment team were the psychological effects of prolonged isolation, heightened anxiety, sensory sensitivities, and difficulty with spatial awareness in open areas. "The human mind isn't designed for that kind of confinement," Dr. Vasquez explained during a briefing with prosecutors. "The fact that she maintained such psychological clarity is remarkable, a testament to her extraordinary resilience." As March turned to April, Brooke's physical recovery progressed steadily. She began working with physical therapists to rebuild strength and stamina. The psychological healing would take longer, but even there, her progress impressed her treatment team. The Callahan family, who had maintained a constant presence at the hospital since Brooke's rescue, provided crucial support during this period. Having moved on from grief to joy to anger and back again, they now focused entirely on supporting their daughter's recovery. "We got our miracle," Brooke's father told the press in a brief statement. "Now we ask for privacy as we help Brooke reclaim her life." For Detective Rivera, the case had become the defining investigation of his career, a testament to persistence in the face of diminishing hope. As he prepared the final case reports, he reflected on the anonymous tip that had finally broken the case open. "We never identified the caller," he noted in his personal case journal, "but the timing and specific knowledge suggested someone close to Tyler, perhaps a girlfriend who noticed something suspicious, or a colleague who pieced things together. Whoever it was, they saved Brooke's life." As April progressed, The prosecution built what legal observers described as an airtight case against Tyler Blackwood. The physical evidence was overwhelming. Brooks' testimony was clear and compelling, and Tyler's own writings provided damning evidence of premeditation and ongoing intent. When offered a plea deal of multiple life sentences without parole in exchange for avoiding the death penalty, Tyler refused, insisting on his right to trial. His court-appointed defense attorney later revealed that Tyler maintained a disturbing perspective on his actions. He genuinely believed he had saved her, that he deserved gratitude rather than punishment. It was a delusion so fixed that no amount of contrary evidence could penetrate it. The stage was set for what promised to be one of the most high-profile criminal trials in Florida's recent history. As April turned to May, media interest in the case remained intense, with documentarians and true crime writers already planning comprehensive accounts of what was being called the homestead captivity. Through it all, Brooke Callahan continued her remarkable journey of recovery, working with therapists to process her trauma while beginning to contemplate the future that had been denied her for nearly 5 years. In a private conversation with Detective Rivera before he completed his involvement with the active case, she expressed a sentiment that would stay with him throughout his career. "He took 5 years of my life," she said, "but not my future. I won't allow that." This resilience, this refusal to be defined by victimhood, would prove to be Brooke's most powerful testimony, both in the courtroom and in the life she would rebuild in the aftermath of an ordeal few could imagine enduring. As spring deepened in Miami, the focus shifted from the investigation to the prosecution and to the long process of justice and healing that lay ahead. The state of Florida versus Tyler Blackwood began on September 15, 2008, 6 months after Brooke Callahan's rescue. The Miami-Dade County Courthouse was surrounded by media trucks and curious onlookers as one of the most anticipated criminal trials in Florida's recent history commenced. Inside, the courtroom was filled to capacity. The prosecution team, led by veteran state attorney Gabriela Moreno, had spent months preparing what legal analysts described as a meticulous case. The defense, despite the overwhelming evidence, had opted for a controversial strategy, acknowledging Tyler's actions while arguing he suffered from a severe mental illness that prevented him from understanding the criminal nature of his conduct. "Make no mistake," defense attorney Richard Dawson told the jury during opening statements, "Tyler Blackwood did build that room. He did hold Brooke Callahan there. These facts are not in dispute. What is in question is his mental state, his ability to distinguish right from wrong when under the influence of a severe psychiatric disorder." This strategy, while legal, struck many observers as particularly callous, given the calculated nature of Tyler's actions. Prosecutor Moreno wasted no time addressing this approach in her opening statement. "The evidence will show that the defendant's actions were not impulsive or disorganized, as we might expect from someone in the grip of psychosis," she told the jury. "They were methodical, planned over months, and executed with precision." The defendant took elaborate precautions to avoid detection. He maintained employment, social relationships, and a facade of normalcy throughout the nearly 5 years he kept Brooke Callahan imprisoned. These are not the actions of someone disconnected from reality. They are the actions of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and took careful steps to conceal it. The prosecution's case began with testimony from the investigators who had discovered the underground bunker. Crime scene photographs and detailed schematics illustrated the sophisticated nature of the prison Tyler had constructed. Structural engineers testified that the bunker's construction would have required significant planning, specialized knowledge, and weeks of intensive labor. "This was not a hastily prepared space," testified one engineer. "The concrete reinforcement, ventilation system, and electrical work all indicate careful design and execution. Whoever built this intended it for long-term human containment." Financial records presented by the prosecution showed Tyler's purchases of construction materials, surveillance equipment, and medical supplies in the months preceding Brooke's disappearance. These records, combined with building permit applications and witness testimony, established a timeline of premeditation that dated back nearly a year before the abduction. On the trial's 4th day, Detective Rivera took the stand. His testimony provided a comprehensive overview of the 5-year investigation, from the initial missing persons report through the various leads and dead ends, culminating in the anonymous tip that had finally broken the case. His meticulous documentation and unwavering persistence throughout the years had produced a record of evidence that left little room for doubt about Tyler's guilt. During cross-examination, defense attorney Dawson attempted to characterize Rivera's focus on Tyler as an obsession that had potentially blinded him to other possibilities. "Detective, isn't it true that you remained fixated on my client even when other leads suggested different directions for the investigation?" Dawson asked. Rivera's response was measured but firm. "I followed every lead to its conclusion, regardless of where it pointed. The evidence consistently brought me back to your client. That's not fixation, that's investigation." The most anticipated testimony came midway through the trial when Brooke Callahan took the stand. Now 24 years old, she appeared remarkably composed despite the circumstances. Though still recovering physically, her frame remained thin, her movements deliberate. Her clarity and presence of mind impressed everyone in the courtroom. For nearly 6 hours over 2 days, Brooke recounted her ordeal in precise detail. She described the initial abduction, the confusion and terror of those first days in captivity, and the psychological strategies Tyler had employed to maintain control. "He wanted me to believe that he was protecting me," she testified. "He would bring news stories about crimes against women, accidents, natural disasters, anything to convince me that the world outside was dangerous and that I should be grateful for his protection." She detailed the routines of her captivity, the monitored food intake, the limited exercise permitted in the confined space, the irregular visits during which Tyler would alternate between expressions of devotion and threatening reminders of her complete dependency. "The physical confinement was only part of it," she explained. "The psychological control, the constant surveillance, the isolation, the manipulation of information that was ultimately more restrictive than the concrete walls." Throughout her testimony, Brooke maintained remarkable composure, even when defense attorney Dawson attempted to suggest that she had eventually developed a form of Stockholm syndrome or complicity in her confinement. "Miss Callahan, is it true that in later years you came to accept certain aspects of your situation? That you expressed gratitude to Mr. Blackwood for the books and other items he provided?" Dawson asked. Brooke's response silenced the courtroom. "When someone controls every aspect of your existence, your food, your air, your only human contact, you learn to navigate their expectations. Yes, I thanked him for books, I engaged in conversations. I did what was necessary to survive, but not for one moment did I forget that I was being held against my will, or stop looking for a way to escape." Perhaps the most damning evidence came from Tyler's own writings. The prosecution introduced hundreds of pages from his journals, which documented his obsession with Brooke, his elaborate rationalization for abducting her, and his plans for their future together. These writings revealed not psychosis, but a calculated, controlling personality who had convinced himself that his actions were justified. "I saved her from a world that doesn't deserve her," read one entry from 2005, approximately 2 years into Brooke's captivity. "She's beginning to understand that everything I've done is for her own good. Eventually she'll realize this is where she belongs." Psychiatric experts, called by both sides, offered contrasting interpretations of Tyler's mental state. The defense psychiatrist diagnosed him with delusional disorder, arguing that his fixed beliefs about protecting Brooke indicated a break with reality. The prosecution's expert countered that Tyler's methodical planning, ability to function normally in society, and efforts to avoid detection all indicated awareness of the wrongful nature of his actions. "Mr. Blackwood exhibits traits of narcissistic and obsessive-compulsive personality disorders," testified Dr. Lawrence Kaplan for the prosecution. "But these traits, even when extreme, do not prevent someone from understanding the criminal nature of kidnapping and false imprisonment. He knew what he was doing was wrong. That's why he went to such elaborate lengths to hide it." Throughout the trial, Tyler himself sat impassively at the defense table, rarely showing emotion even during the most damning testimony. He declined to testify in his own defense, a decision legal analysts attributed to the likelihood that cross-examination would only further reveal the calculated nature of his crimes. After 3 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. Their deliberations were remarkably brief, just 6 hours before reaching unanimous verdicts on all counts. On October 9, 2008, Tyler Blackwood was found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and multiple associated felonies. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Judge Mariana Rodriguez listened as victim impact statements were presented. Brooke's parents described the 5 years of anguish they had endured, not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead. Friends and former classmates spoke of the promising life that had been interrupted, the potential that had been put on hold. When it was Brooke's turn to address the court, her statement was brief but powerful. "I lost 1,636 days of my life," she said, looking directly at Tyler for the first time since the trial began. "I lost opportunities, experiences, and connections that can never be recovered. But I am still here. I survived. And while you took those years from me, you don't get to take any more." Judge Rodriguez, noting the premeditated nature of the crimes and the extraordinary suffering inflicted, sentenced Tyler Blackwood to 75 years in prison without possibility of parole. The sentence effectively ensured he would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. "The court cannot undo the harm you have caused," Judge Rodriguez told Tyler as she delivered the sentence, "but it can ensure that you never again have the opportunity to inflict such suffering on another human being." As Tyler was led from the courtroom, the focus shifted from the perpetrator to the survivor. Brooke's journey of recovery, which had begun the moment she was rescued, now entered a new phase. The months following the trial brought both challenges and progress. Brooke continued intensive physical therapy to address the muscular atrophy caused by years of confinement. She worked with psychologists specializing in trauma recovery, gradually processing the complex psychological effects of her captivity. "Recovery from prolonged trauma isn't linear," explained Dr. Mendelsohn, who continued to work with Brooke after the trial. "There are setbacks along with progress, unexpected triggers alongside moments of breakthrough. What's remarkable about Brooke is her psychological resilience, her ability to acknowledge the trauma without allowing it to define her. This resilience manifested in Brooke's determination to reclaim her education. In January 2009, she re-enrolled at the University of Miami, resuming the psychology studies that had been interrupted nearly 6 years earlier. The university provided accommodations for her unique circumstances, allowing flexible attendance and private study spaces to help manage the anxiety she still experienced in crowded environments. "Being back on campus was terrifying at first," Brooke later recalled in a rare interview, "but it was also empowering, taking back a piece of my life that had been stolen." By the spring semester, she had adjusted sufficiently to maintain a full course load. Professors noted her exceptional insight, particularly in courses related to trauma and resilience, subjects she understood not just academically, but through lived experience. In May 2010, 7 years after she should have graduated, Brooke Callahan received her bachelor's degree in psychology, graduating with honors. The ceremony received no media coverage, a deliberate choice as Brooke had declined all interview requests, preferring to focus on recovery rather than reliving her ordeal for public consumption. Following graduation, Brooke continued her education, pursuing a master's degree in clinical psychology with a focus on trauma recovery. Her academic work began to inform emerging therapeutic approaches for survivors of captivity and prolonged isolation. Detective Landon Rivera, who had remained in periodic contact with Brooke, attended her graduate school graduation in 2012. "Seeing her walk across that stage was one of the most meaningful moments of my career," he later recalled. "It represented everything we hope for when we solve a case, not just justice but healing and reclamation." By 2013, 5 years after her rescue, Brooke had established a new life that balanced acknowledgement of her past with determination to define her own future. She began working as a consultant for law enforcement agencies, helping to develop protocols for interviewing and supporting victims of long-term captivity and isolation. She also established a foundation providing resources for families of missing persons and survivors of abduction, offering financial support for ongoing searches, connecting families with appropriate investigative resources, and funding therapeutic services for those who had endured similar traumas. The Callahan Foundation filled a critical gap in our support systems, noted Maria Gonzalez, who had been promoted to captain following the successful resolution of Brooke's case. "It brings together investigative expertise and trauma-informed care in a way that simply didn't exist before." Tyler Blackwood, meanwhile, disappeared into the prison system, his appeals systematically denied, as courts repeatedly affirmed both his legal competence and the appropriateness of his sentence. The property and homestead where he had held Brooke was eventually demolished, the land donated to a community garden project, a deliberate transformation of a space once defined by confinement. In 2018, marking the 10-year anniversary of her rescue, Brooke published a memoir titled 1,136 Days. The book, which became a national bestseller, was notable for its focus on resilience and recovery, rather than the sensationalistic details that had characterized media coverage of her case. "I wrote this not to dwell on the darkness," she explained in the book's introduction, "but to illuminate the path forward, for myself and for others who have endured trauma that seems insurmountable." The book described not only her captivity and rescue, but the complex process of rebuilding a life interrupted, the challenges of reconnecting with a world that had continued without her, the process of rediscovering identity after prolonged isolation, and the difficult balance between acknowledging trauma and refusing to be defined by it. By 2020, Brooke had established herself as a leading voice in trauma psychology, completing a doctoral program and developing innovative therapeutic approaches specifically for survivors of captivity and extreme isolation. Her work, informed by both academic research and personal experience, has influenced protocols for survivor support across multiple fields. "What happened to me will always be part of my story," she noted during a 2022 academic conference where she was the keynote speaker. "But it isn't the whole story, and it doesn't determine the chapters yet to be written." For Detective Rivera, who retired from the Miami-Dade Police Department in 2020 after 30 years of service, Brooke's case remains the most significant of his career, not just because of the extraordinary circumstances, but because of the living testament to human resilience that emerged from it. "In this job, you see the worst of humanity," he reflected during his retirement interview, "but sometimes, if you're very fortunate, you also get to see the best, the capacity to survive, to heal, and to transform suffering into purpose. That's what Brooke Callahan has done, and it's a privilege to have played some small part in making that possible." Today, the case of Brooke Callahan's abduction and survival is studied in criminal justice programs, psychology courses, and victim advocacy training throughout the country. The investigation serves as a model of persistence in cold cases, while her recovery offers profound insights into human resilience and the potential for post-traumatic growth. The underground room where Brooke spent 1,736 days no longer exists. The physical evidence of her captivity has been catalogued and archived, but the legacy of her survival, the work she continues to do, the lives she has influenced, and the example she has set, remains a powerful reminder that even after the darkest captivity, freedom and purpose are possible. As Brooke herself wrote in the conclusion of her memoir, "5 years were taken from me. The rest are mine to claim."